They say you could hear the rustle of silk and a faint chime of silver bells before you saw him. That was the warning. The courtiers would bow low, eyes averted, and children were taught never to look directly at the monarch's face, not because it was forbidden, but because none knew what lay beneath. He was eccentric, well-read, and fascinated with disfigurement and delusion. Summoned by the king for private counsel, Run was never seen again. Some claimed he left in the night, others that his screams echoed for hours within the palace walls. After that night, the king's decrees became stranger. All statues were to be blindfolded. Dogs were no longer allowed in the capital. Church bells were replaced with the soft ringing of silver chimes, delicate, unnerving, like laughter heard through a wall. And so the years passed. The mask aged, chipped, and was replaced by another, then another. Always the same design, always the same silence. For nearly 50 years, King Alaric IV of Valenda wore a mask. The Queen's pavilion was open to the public, a final opportunity to pay respects to their beloved monarch. Before she was laid to rest beside her husband in the family crypt, it was said the coffin was draped with a pall, but inside it, there was no figure swaddled in royal finery, no crown jewels, no even bones. Only an oily black stain spreading across the velvet lining like a spilled ink blotch. Soon after, the new queen, Alaric's niece Isidora, arrived from the south. She was young, beautiful, and openly hostile towards her uncle, making no secret of her belief that the throne belonged to her as the eldest member of the royal family. But Alaric, for the first time in anyone's memory, was unfazed by the criticism. During the coronation ceremony, when the old, worn mask was placed upon his head, the king finally spoke. His voice was that of a young man, high and clear, without a hint of Alaric's usual rasp. "Let the bells ring tonight," he commanded, "for we have much to celebrate." And indeed, they rang, echoing across the silent kingdom, the sound of porcelain on stone. From his throne, the king watched the people below, their faces illuminated by torchlight, their joyous expressions turned inward, upward, toward the magnificent, terrifying spectacle of their king, at last unmasked. Not once in public, nor in the presence of his wives, ministers, or even his own children, did he remove it. It became less an object and more an extension of his being, a smooth, pale porcelain visage with empty black eyes and lips eternally sealed in an unreadable line. The kingdom itself seemed shaped by his concealment. Portraits of the king bore only his masked likeness. Coins were minted with that expressionless face. The Cathedral of Valenda, built under his reign, bore a stained glass window depicting him as a faceless angel descending upon the land. But beneath the hush and reverence, rumors swirled like smoke around a dying candle. Some claimed he was born, hideously deformed. Others whispered he had been burned in a fire set by his own mother, a punishment for being the product of an incestuous union. But the most persistent tale was the one no one dared speak aloud, that Alaric was not the rightful king at all, but an impostor, kept hidden behind porcelain to preserve a dynasty of lies. Alaric ascended the throne at the age of 16, after the sudden and suspicious death of his older brother, Crown Prince Cedric. The royal physician declared it a fever, but the court buzzed with darker theories. Only one person had seen Cedric last, the young Alaric, who'd spent the evening playing a game of masks with his brother. That same night, the boy prince returned to his chambers wearing a painted porcelain mask. He never took it off again. In the early years of his reign, Alaric ruled quietly, almost timidly, letting his ministers speak for him. But that passivity grew into something else. By his 30s, the masked king had become an obsessive reformer. He outlawed mirrors in noble households. Artists were forbidden from painting faces. Public executions were carried out behind curtains with only the sound of the axe permitted to confirm the sentence. It was said that those who pried too deeply into the king's private affairs vanished. Monasteries were built in the mountains far from the capital, where the monks never spoke, never showed their faces, and devoted themselves to copying the king's decrees in silence. And yet, beneath the veil of order and ritual, unease festered. The king's third wife, Queen Evelini, was found drowned in the palace fountain. His youngest son, Prince Iseult, was sent to the House of Stillness. A royal sanitarium after publicly asking why his father never smiled. The people grew quiet, too not from love but from fear. One stormy autumn, a traveling physician named Dr. Run arrived from the eastern reaches of the kingdom. But then came the day of the royal funeral. As always, thank you for tuning in and special thanks to our supporters. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Europe fell into what is sometimes known as the Dark Ages, a period of history between the 5th and 10th centuries characterized by a supposed decline in culture, industry, and population. Founded in the aftermath of the Great Collapse, its kings were said to have descended from the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, and they ruled over their people for centuries. But there was a catch. To succeed to the throne, each king had to wear a silver mask. One night, a young princess stood before the mountain, tears streaming down her face. She reached out as if to touch it, and a single tear fell onto the ground below. Suddenly, the mountain blazed with unnatural brightness. The princess screamed as the mountain seemed to come alive, tendrils of flame reaching toward her. Terrified, she ran, hiding in the palace of her suitor, a neighboring lord. The throne remained empty. The court disbanded. If you enjoyed this tale, please lend your support. And as always, until next time, stay safe. And across the land, people began to remove their own masks, both literal and not. Some took to fire, some to prayer, but all lived with the echo of those words, "I must be still. I must be the mask." A mask that hid their face and forced them to speak through a tube. The next night, he climbed to the very peak of the mountain, resin in hand. Instead, the regent council made a proclamation. The king's face would be revealed publicly for the first time. Some believed it was to quell the rumors. Others thought it a warning to any future usurper. But the truth? It was curiosity. Morbid, irresistible curiosity. The grand hall of mourning was filled to the edge. Nobles in black silks, priests in blood-colored robes, foreign dignitaries, artists, poets silent as statues. The king's body lay beneath a veil of gold lace, the mask worn until death was still on his face. The high regent stepped forward, hands shaking, and lifted it. What followed was silence, then a scream, then the stampede. Witnesses later described a face not deformed, not burned but empty, not in the way of a corpse, but in the way of something never fully alive. The flesh beneath was smooth, poreless, almost waxy. No stubble, no eyebrows. The eyes were glassy painted, the nose to perfect. A face, yes, but not a human one. Below him, the princess watched as he set the resin alight and hurled himself into the flames. Before her, the mountain blazed, brighter than ever before, and the king was never seen again. A mask that also just so happened to be cursed. Although recent scholarship has challenged the validity of this so-called Dark Ages moniker, the royal vaults were opened, and inside they found diaries, hundreds of them all written in the same hand, all signed A. But none made mention of events, people, or policies. Only phrases repeated, "I am still him. I am still him. I must be still. I must be the mask." Further search uncovered something more disturbing. Beneath the palace, in a chamber lined with velvet, they found bodies, desiccated, clothed in royal robes, faces missing, skulls opened, and on each skull, a marking carved in wax, discarded. A scholar later uncovered a letter and signed, "Unsent," half burned in, which a royal tutor wrote of a child Prince found catatonic after witnessing his brother's death, of a court that had chosen ritual over scandal, of a puppet made flesh, stitched from silence and fear. There's no denying that this period was a tumultuous one. Kingdoms rose and fell. New religions spread across the continent, and remnants of classical antiquity were either lost or altered. But amidst this chaos, one small kingdom managed to endure. The kingdom of Ethelstan, hidden away in a valley shrouded by mist and legend. Our story begins with the coronation of King Alaric II. Newly crowned and newly masked, he addressed his court. The king's voice emerged distorted, rasping, and it chilled the crowd. By all accounts, the new king was the worst of the bunch. As the highest structure in the land, it would also be the first to go up in flames. And so he ordered a massive supply of resin and flax to be stored within its peak, just in case. But King Alaric V was not a patient man, and as the years passed without incident, he grew bored of his precious resin, and so he ordered that it be put to use. Each night, he lit the resin aflame, turning his palace into a giant torch, bathing the mountain in an orange glow. It became a nightly spectacle, visible from every corner of the kingdom. Not only was he physically repulsive, he was also a tyrant. At the height of his power, he ordered the construction of a new royal palace. It was to be built atop the highest mountain in the kingdom, overlooking everything, everyone. It was to be his monument. He looked down at the golden scepter in his hands, then raised it high, and as the crowd gasped, he smashed it against the floor. So began his reign. Cruel, erratic, yet strangely compelling. He was succeeded by Alaric III, then by Alaric IV, and then by Alaric V. And as the palace neared completion, King Alaric V grew uneasy. His obsession did not go unnoticed. When the king heard of this, he was furious, and so he decided to put an end to this insolence once and for all. The kingdom expected a closed casket, a marble tomb, something befitting a man who had spent his entire life in mystery. Panic seized the capital. That day, the royal line of Valenda ended. Thank you for listening. Years passed. The kingdom of Valenda faded from maps, its borders redrawn by war and indifference. There were tapestries depicting his features, his eyes warm and unguarded, his smile bright and easy, his hair the color of spun gold. She died believing her son would carry on his father's legacy, ushering in an era of peace and prosperity. But within months of taking the throne, Alaric had plunged the kingdom into darkness. He forsook his duties, neglecting his people. He became withdrawn, haunted by something unseen, speaking in riddles and laughing at nothing. Then came the night of the blood moon, when the entire kingdom was plunged into darkness. It lasted only an hour, yet it felt like an eternity. And when dawn broke, the people found the king kneeling in the courtyard, babbling in a language not his own. From that day forward, the king never left the palace. Veiled in rumors, the king retreated further into himself until he was nothing more than a whisper, a spectre haunting the halls of a ruined keep. But over time, those images rotted or were burned. Others believe he was a vessel, inhabited by something far older than any crown. And perhaps the more terrifying answer is this: he still is. But a very few, claim that we all wear the mask. That behind every title, every ritual, every polite silence, we are simply echoing the king, hiding in plain sight, smiling through porcelain. And so the mask remains not in museums but in stories, in the way we speak half-truths, in the way we look away, in the way power wraps itself in beauty and silence until we forget there was ever a face beneath. And now no one can recall what the king looked like, only that he wore a mask, a flawless porcelain mask that hid his face and gave him eyes like polished onyx. Its capital, once a city of whispers and silken rituals, crumbled beneath ivy and moss. They found no bones, no diaries, only mirrors, hundreds of them, all intact, all facing inward, each reflecting nothing. Among the scholars was a young historian named Emryn Vale. She had grown up on the tales of Alaric and sought to prove they were nothing more than legend. Yet after returning from the expedition, she refused to speak. For the rest of her days, she wrote in a language no one could decipher, using symbols that resembled the wax marks found on the discarded skulls. On her deathbed, she whispered one thing: he was never alone. And yet the legend of the masked king endured, growing darker, stranger, following the sudden and suspicious death of his father, King Oberon. His mother, Queen Isolde, desperate to protect her son from those who might seek the throne for themselves, kept him hidden away in the royal manor, cloistered with tutors and priests. But as Alaric grew older, the walls of his gilded cage grew to confining. He longed for the freedom of the forest, the whisper of the wind in the trees, the feel of sunlight on his skin. So the queen allowed him one small concession, a single hour each day outside the manor walls. It was then that Alaric met the woodsman, an enigmatic figure clad in green who seemed to know the secrets of the forest. As the two walked among the ancient trees, Alaric learned of a world beyond the confines of his gilded cage. He heard tales of distant lands and people, of love and loss, of life and death. The woods man, in turn, learned of the young king's sorrows, his fears, his hopes. Their friendship deepened, offering solace and understanding that neither had known before, until history itself seemed to reject it. Travelers speak of a cloaked figure seen in the forests at twilight, wearing a porcelain mask that glows faintly under moonlight. Children sing songs that end with the line, "Don't let the mask see you cry." In the ruins of the royal palace, now overtaken by roots and shadow, some say they still hear the sound of bells, soft, silver, like breath behind your ear. There was a time when the king's face was known. Scholars obsessed with uncovering the truth once dared to excavate the palace catacombs. Alaric came to the throne at the age of 14. When Alaric turned 18, his mother finally relented, allowing him to rule. Some say Alaric was a victim, a boy who watched something unspeakable and in that moment shattered. You may ask, who was the king of Valenda? The better question is, what was he?